We're talking about multicellularity. Here are our syllabus dot points, and we start off pretty self-explanatory, really. If we're talking about unicellular versus multicellular, we're talking about simple organisms here that are unicellular. They can be prokaryotic, they can be eukaryotic, but they're carrying out all 7 functions of life in just one cell. They can be stationary or they can have the ability to move, but their cell size is always going to be limited by that surface area to volume ratio. Some work in colonies, so they work together, but they're not actually fused. And we're talking here about yeast, bacteria, amoeba, paramecium, lots of different choices. Multicellular organisms, however, that is one single fused set of cells, right? It's a mass of cells, and they're all cooperative cells. They're working together. We sometimes talk about emergent properties. So the whole is actually greater than the sum of its parts, because the functions that we can get from all those fused cells working together is actually more than if we looked at them all individually. We're talking levels of organization here. Then we start off at that very, very tiny cellular level, at the atomic level. They work together to give molecules. Eventually our molecules are going to become macromolecules and become parts of a cell, and that cell is that basic unit of life. The cells all work together in tissues. The tissues work together to form organs. Organ systems then all work together to create the entire organism. So it's very complex, and it keeps stepping up in levels. We've spoken before about how stem cells differentiate into specialized cells in the body, which can then form tissues and organs and all those kinds of things. And genetic code is in charge of determining what pathway those cells take and how they differentiate. So depending on which genes are switched on and off will determine which proteins are produced, and in turn what that actual cell does as a job, right? How all the different parts of it work to do its job effectively. So cells in the same tissues or organs may do similar jobs, or actually they can do different. So for example, in the pancreas, there's different types of cells. Some make digestive enzymes, some make hormones like insulin. So we have red blood cells here, and we know that red blood cells actually remove their nucleus, so they have more space to hold onto protein called hemoglobin, which allows it to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide around the body. We've got an actual ovum, and it can hold nutrients in its cytoplasm for those early embryonic development days. It also has a really specialized membrane, so it can actually close down once that first sperm penetrates it. We have muscle cells. They're all bundled together in tissue, in long fibers. They have lots and lots of mitochondria, and those nuclei are all pushed to the middle. You can see that there. We have plant cells with lots of chloroplasts, so they can do lots of photosynthesis. We have pancreatic tissue, which I mentioned just before. You can see the 2 different types of tissue there that do very different types of jobs. We have small intestinal tissue that's arranged in big folds so that it has increased surface area to do lots of absorption. We've got our sperm cells with those tails for mobility. We've got very specialized enzymes in the head of the sperm so it can burrow into that egg. Lots of mitochondria to keep doing that swimming. And we've got some xylem and phloem cells in plants, which are arranged in really long tubes to get the water and the other nutrients around the plant. So each cell type will have really specific features that allow it to do its specialized jobs. We're speaking specifically here about cell structure. So the slides contain lots of words about the structure, but you have to listen verbally for those functions. All right, red blood cells we've just discussed. They actually remove their nucleus, have a very specialized shape. It's called a biconcave disc, and that shape allows for efficient gas exchange, has big surface area on that membrane, and the nucleus is removed so that it can carry more of that hemoglobin and therefore do its job really efficiently. A neuron here, so it's a really long elongated cell, very special, as you can see, in that axon that runs sideways. That's going to allow the electrical signal to go all the way down. It's got that branched shape as well in the dendrites in the cell body so that it can reach out and connect to the other neurons. And it's pretty insulated. You can see the myelin sheath around the axon, and that's going to prevent signal loss as it goes, as the electrical signal goes down the axon. We have some ciliated cells here. These are often in your lungs or your nasal cavity. They're also in the fallopian tubes, and they have these long hairs at the top. That's what cilia are. And what they're there to do is to move and circulate fluid. So if it's in your lungs or in your throat or something like that, it's to move that fluid away. And our sperm here, it's got that really long streamlined tail for mobility. It's got to be able to swim to meet the ovum. It's got so many mitochondria because it needs that energy to keep doing the swimming, and the enzymes in the head also allow it to continue to burrow into the ovum once it gets there. Some different examples in plant cells. We have our root hair cells here. They have a really long protrusion out the side or down the bottom, wherever it's actually situated. And what that does is increase surface area for nutrient and water absorption, so it gets all into the plant. And we have our palisade cells here, which have a large number of chloroplasts, obviously to photosynthesize. We also have a large vacuole to store the sugars and water that is coming from the photosynthesis. All right, let's take it a next step up, which is about tissue structure and function. So we're going to add to this type by saying, hey, we're going to push all these cells that do similar jobs together and see how efficiently they can perform that function. So that's why we talk about emergent properties, or the idea that the new properties can arise from the interactions of those cells working together in tissues. All right, starting off with muscle tissue, they're really bunched cells. They allow for muscles to contract and relax, and they have heaps of mitochondria, which makes sense to us because they need the energy to keep working. We have loose connective tissue here, and this is woven really loosely with elastin fibers, and it allows for stretch and flexibility, but it's still incredibly tough. Some more tissues, some plant tissues. So vascular tissue in plants, so xylem, phloem, they can be arranged in very long tubes. Some of the cells are actually dead. They have filter cells through them as well, but it does allow for the transport of water and nutrients and sugars and all those things around the plant. Here are some epithelial cells. They are all over our body. They are in lots of different places, usually parts that are exposed to the outside world. So we can actually have them in single or multiple layers of cells. You can see some examples there. They can be really flattened, or they can be really tall columns. They can have those little cilia, those little hairs. They can be transitional depending on what they need to be doing. If they need to increase the absorption, sure, they'll have some cilia. Transitional ones with lots of different shapes, so that's that one down the bottom right. It allows for a bit more stretch and change of shape depending on what body part it is in. All right, now we'll take a step up again. We're into the organ structure. This is all those tissues connecting as organs to allow for a vital function in that organism. So we've got our small intestines. It's got huge amounts of villi, those big wavy structures, I suppose you could say, at the microscopic level, at the cellular level, and that's to increase that surface area to allow for more absorption. And it's actually got a very close running blood supply as well to those villi, so that nutrient absorption can go straight into the bloodstream. Now, our lungs are really effective at gas exchange and waste removal. So they have really tiny alveoli, think like a little bunch of grapes, and that is where the gas exchange is actually occurring. So we have very close running blood supply again because of that absorption is coming in straight through that alveoli. Some plant tissues here. We've got our guard cells. They're arranged to allow for the opening of the leaf pore, and those cells are also arranged to create, they're in layers so that we have a very tough exterior. All those palisade cells below doing the photosynthesis, and then all that oxygen or carbon dioxide can be exchanged at the bottom. We have kidneys. This is an incredibly complex system, very huge surface area for exchange, once again, to remove and absorb waste or reabsorb things that actually the body needs. It has very close blood supply, once again, to allow those things that are being reabsorbed into the body to stay in the bloodstream very quickly. And they have so many nephrons, which is that unit of filtration, working together to drain into one central kidney to remove any waste. So that's a lot just on describing hierarchical organization of cells.